Welcome to the Founders Foyer with me, Aishwarya. This foyer is full of conversations, the space where creators, founders, and builders look for all the support and concepts to grow their ideas into products. If you've been sharing stuff and reading through Twitter and LinkedIn, there's so much buzz around building in public. Especially over the last couple of years, a lot of founders, solopreneurs, and creators who worked on side projects really leveraged the network and built both their ideas as well as found the product market fit through these networks. So today's chat is going to be all about building in public and the things that you need to know and the stuff that you need to learn to get started with. Say hello to Karthik Puvvada, fondly called KP, the Build in Public guy. KP is the founder and CEO of Build in Public Studio, a media and consultancy company aimed at helping create more successful founders in the world. KP has also formally led educational programs at OnDeck and Day One, having helped more than 500 plus no-code builders and founders. Hey, KP, super excited to chat with you here on the show today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, finally good to see you on the show. And I've followed your journey across on Twitter. So it's super inspirational. And especially for side project builders like us, a lot of us look up to the stuff that you do and also the way that you pitch and help founders. So I'm very excited to discuss all things building public with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Awesome. So from setting up Build in Public Studio to writing, coaching, and literally building your own side projects, how did you enter this creative entrepreneurial journey, KP?
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely wouldn't have predicted 5 years ago that I would be doing any of the things that I'm doing now. I almost thought the journey would have been so linear that for like many of us, we have this sort of entrepreneurial bug or the itch to build something. And I think the assumption 5-6 years ago for me was that I would just become a founder and, and go from somebody with an idea to starting a company and like all the formal processes, like the incorporation, the LLC, the S Corp, whatever, and then get customers, revenue, fundraising. And that's really the linear path, only path that I was aware of because of how mainstream that path was at the time, thanks to TechCrunch and thanks to all these, stories you hear about. So I really didn't awaken to the creator side of this until 2018. I've said this story a couple of times where out of sheer necessity that I was trying to get some feedback for some of the side project ideas that I had, and I didn't have any network. I didn't have anybody around me who would give me quality feedback or candid feedback and kind of brainstorm and take the conversation forward. So I realized that this is like building in vacuum and it feels so hard unnecessarily. And I thought, what if I just built in public? And what if I shared every step of the way, whatever decision that I was taking that day, publicly, and get people's input and kind of create a reality show around the journey, right? What if I just showed people what it feels like to be inside the part of the process? And that blew up. And I really got a ton of feedback and visibility and distribution and marketing and all these side effects. But really, I felt that I was building not in a vacuum, not in silo, where I'm it felt so hard. It felt so much easier.
Yeah.
It just felt so easier. It was so natural to someone like me that all my natural instincts and natural gifts that I have came to life. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is it. And so I went from one project on Product Hunt that I built and shipped, from there to 15 or 20. I lost count this last year. Essentially building everything that I did in public. That was the portfolio of side projects, which led me to even pitching myself. When I first got my green card, I pitched myself because I was new to startups and I was looking for a startup job. I pitched my services in public on Twitter, and that blew up. I call it the bat signal thread, which is in 2020, September, I did that and blew up. I think I got 40 interviews. At the time I had 3,000 or some followers, and I built up, good momentum. So people knew that I was a promising candidate. They knew that I had some potential. But I think after a series of interviews, finally OnDeck gave me irrefusable like offer. It was so perfectly fit for my strengths, my no code background, and I was asked to lead their first ever no code fellowship, global
Hmm.
fellowship. We had about 500 fellows, which you described earlier, and
Yeah.
so that was my foray into Silicon Valley, virtually. Like although I didn't like sort of it was in pandemic, so I was still at home, but um, and from there I just never looked back. I built a public podcast in public. I
Hmm.
recruited Gary Vee, Alexis Ohanian, like Sahil, like all these people that I thought were inaccessible. I realized that if you have, proof of work, and if you put
Yeah.
in reps and sets in public, there are other people, all these awesome people that you look up to want to come collaborate with you, if you are a
Hmm.
very public person.
Yeah.
So that's been this theme. And I think now with the studio, after day one, I left, I think in end of November, I left day one, which is similar to OnDeck. And I realized that this is my time to go solo, to be independent, be a
Hmm.
founder. But I find myself doing a lot of creator activities. So I've kind of given myself grace and freedom to not tie myself to be only a SaaS founder or a marketplace founder or a
Right.
startup founder. So I view myself as a fluid founder creator, which is like the new persona, I think, um, where I want to have a portfolio of businesses, software businesses that will generate revenue and they will grow, bootstrap businesses.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I want to have a portfolio of distribution channels, filled with, authenticity and my view of life, building public and these
Hmm.
philosophies that I believe in. They kind of help each other out, right? So I'm building both a media company and also a tech company. So
Yeah.
it's this interesting juxtaposition that I think I'm doing right now.
Yeah, awesome. So, what I really liked about the way you crafted this whole journey is how each of these points, sort of like how you started this conversation saying, I don't want it to be linear, though you started thinking it would turn out to be linear. But it's like a very nice curve where each point led to the other, knowingly or unknowingly. And then there's this whole, at each phase, you tried something new. And now looking back, I guess the right word to call it is portfolio, because you don't want to
Yeah.
like label it as one particular thing, but all of it came well into like a basket of things. And I
Yes.
would say that that's exactly how most creative minds would think about it, because a lot of great points you made, especially with respect to the proof of work and having to look at a collection of projects and not just going by one specific thing, but you would like to have both the space and time to think through and just have like a very creative side to the
Right.
same work that we do day to day. So
Yeah.
great
I
stuff
think
there, KP.
one thing yeah, thank you. One thing I want to address here is that there was a big misconception that I had early on,
Hmm.
that I thought you had to be hyper focused in only one thing to really achieve success. And we hear some great stories about people who just did one thing really well 10,000 times, which is true, right? Of course, that is one of the ways of reaching the summit. But what I've learned is there's infinite ways to reach the summit. And also,
Yeah.
what is your success, may be different from what somebody else's success, right? Somebody may just be refining and fine tuning just one tool or one product for a course of 10 years, and that's success to them, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When it reaches some high quality. But I think for myself, like a musician or an artist, like you grew up I grew up in India too, like A.R. Rahman. Like Rahman doesn't have just like one
Yeah.
album that he's producing and
Yeah.
playing for the rest of his life, right? He
Yeah.
he dabbles with creative things, like there's different genres he plays with. So I've realized that I am very much like that I cannot help myself but have burst of ideas. And one of the people that used to work for me, she gave me a fantastic compliment. She said, KP, it's so exhausting being with you. And I was like, what? And she said, because you're a fountain of ideas. You're constantly coming up with new things, new initiatives. And she meant it in a very positive way. She said, like, it's just like you need like a team of people behind you, just kind of collecting the ducks and putting them in a row. And I realized I could either do two things. I could view this as a liability and be crushed by my own, you know, um, traits, or I
Hmm.
could view my traits as a asset and
Yeah.
think, oh, this is what I'm meant to do, right? I'm meant to be the person who will build a portfolio, not one company or one product, one side project or one podcast and that's it, So,
Yeah.
I again, like, I still don't know if this is the right way, Aishwarya, but I know that this is the way that gives me the most peace, most
Yeah.
happiness,
And
and
energy.
it somehow ironically energy, and somehow ironically makes me more, like, in people's eyes is making me more successful. I'm like, wow, I'm not doing anything different. I'm just living my life, but in public,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's this see, one part is definitely the confidence, the fact that you're willing to explore these different depths and you're willing to learn what it takes as new skills because you
yes,
constantly keep discovering more things about yourself. And the other part that I really like about portfolio, which I think now I would bring in as a very contextual thing to what we're discussing, is it helps you like stitch across interests from different passions of yours. So you don't just say that,
yeah,
you know what, I'm this tech person, so I'm just going to look at it only from the tech lens. But just because you get inspired from, let's say, music, you brought in A.R. Rahman, and that's
yeah,
like the most apt example I could even relate to because growing up in India and having like grown up to a lot of what his music would feel like and the kind of influence it could have in our lives. Even Rahman doesn't usually go in and say, you know what, I'm a musician, so let me just look only at the instruments. No, he takes influence
right,
from nature, he takes influence from across different fields and just like uses people's feedback, uses different artisans' feedback. So I guess that's the power of having this kind of a very portfolio built pursuit for your career is because you don't just say that if I'm a founder, I have to look at certain things in a certain way, but you're just willing to stretch apart and you're just willing to take references and inputs and like creative juices from across different pursuits. So I think that's another thing that
yeah,
I see as the best part of, like doing this.
yeah.
So,
I,
yeah.
that just what you just said reminded me that I think, our parents, I grew up in India until I was 20 there, and I moved when I was 21. But so I grew up in very, like, lower middle class family, and I know the mindset that I was surrounded when I was a kid. It was around stability and, like, linear career. It was all about just have a job, just get a job, keep it. Literally, that's it.
Mhm.
Like, there's only two things, right? Just get a job and keep it
Yeah.
for 30, 40 years and retire, and then do whatever you want after that. And I always felt that that was somehow limiting. And I thought, it's great if you loved that, right? If you
Mhm.
were, I don't know, if you were in the military and you, like, I don't know, loved serving your country, and then it makes sense to stick with that job, with that career for 30, 40, 50 years, like, dedicate your life to that. Um, but I would argue with the rise of the internet, and now with the abundance of resources we have at our
Mhm.
disposal, right? We have all these amazing apps, tools, websites, YouTube, Udemy, no code tools like Webflow, Bubble, Adalo, right? Like, name it, software, podcasting tools. This would have been impossible. What you and I are doing right here 10
Yeah.
years ago would have been impossible, right? Like,
Yeah.
because now with the rise of Zoom and the rise of, like, these microphones and, like, Descript and all these other tools, that you're able to stitch together a show relatively easily compared to 15 years ago. There would have
Mhm.
been a 5-person team trying to create one episode, where now you're doing it by yourself,
All by
probably,
itself.
right? Or maybe one
Yeah.
other person, right?
Just me.
I think
Yeah.
so. I
Yeah.
think it's a missed opportunity if you don't take advantage of the rise of the internet. It's like saying, like, there's generations of people that we know who just never can understand and empathize and, like, really feel
Mhm.
the joy of having a laptop, right? My grandma never had a laptop, so she doesn't get what the laptop is. So she's like, what are you doing on the laptop? Because in her mind, she doesn't understand what the laptop does, right? So I feel the same way, like, in our generation, as you're born now, or if you're, like, 20, 30, 40 years old now, the internet, presents itself as an opportunity to kind of explore your creative selves,
Mhm.
explore all your passions, explore, like, whatever you want to build, become a creator, become a builder. And it will be a missed opportunity if you spend 20 years stuck in a linear career,
Mhm.
only being a PM forever, right? I mean, unless it's your passion, that's okay. The only exception I have is if that's your entire passion, that's fine, right? There are people who just want to be a teacher. Their entire passion is to be a teacher. 30 years, great. But I think people like me, if there are people like me in the audience who are creatively bent and who are feeling discomfort in being a linear career, I think you should give yourself grace and permission to explore and be confident in the fact that
Yeah.
your path is unconventional, and it's okay to be
Yeah.
unconventional.
Yeah. A lot of this comes with recognizing what interests you and what gives you more energy. So a lot of self-introspection at the same time. Once you know what ticks you and like what makes you go forward with everything that you want to try, then I guess the non-linear part of it would really make sense, because then you wouldn't just go by what others tell you about, what,
Yes.
this really makes sense. This is the way, this is the
Right.
path that you have to follow. Instead, I think
Right.
you would start thinking more around what is something that's driving you. And if there's a 9 to 5 that's really helping you and driving you, well, that's great. And also you would do something from the rest of the evening to the morning, because you know what really takes you, what really keeps you with the balance. So yeah, that's
Right.
that's
And
another,
I
way.
I wish for everyone to explore, right? Don't settle. Explore all these curiosities you may naturally be inclined towards, and
Mhm.
design the ideal life that you wish to live. So that you
Yeah.
don't have to escape from it for the weekend or for a vacation. Like,
Yeah.
my pursuit has been the last 4 or 5 years. I've realized that I'm talented enough to do any job I want now. Like, I've been in corporate for 8 years. I've been in product teams. I know you have a lot of product audience. I was on the NBA app, mobile app, official app team. We designed mobile apps. And I realized I could do that. I could be in business. I've led sales teams. I've done partnerships, and I've ran the education programs. I can be in ed tech. So I realized there are certain things that I could just do in my sleep. I'm just I'm good at those. I've done it many, many times. I'm so talented about them. But the question is not that, it's
Mm.
what are the things that light me up? What are the things that feel like
Exactly.
fun, not work, right?
Yeah.
How can I design a lifestyle around these 4 to 5 things and get paid so that I don't have to worry about the basics like bills and, like, monthly expenses, but so that I don't ever feel like I'm working. The last
Mm.
2 years, I never felt like I was working because I was
Mm.
doing a lot of the things that give me energy.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Yeah.
a cheat code. I wish for all of the audience, all of the listeners here to reflect on yourself. Like, what are things that
Yeah.
give you energy, and design a life that maps to that, and never ever compare your
Yeah.
book with anybody else's book,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody will have their own version of this, and it's like trying to compare my DNA, my thumbprint DNA, with like Aishwarya's or somebody else's, and thinking, oh, hers is prettier. Like, who gives a crap, right? Like, it's not about
Yeah.
that. It's about hers is hers, mine is mine. This is the
Yeah.
this is the trap, though. A lot of people who take unconventional careers compare themselves with people
That's
who are
true.
in conventional careers, and they're like, oh, by this time somebody's making 200K. Who cares? They're living their life. Your
Yeah.
job is to live your life to the fullest.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the fact that each of us runs our own, like we have our own cycle and we have different things that really push us forward. And like you said, looking at what constitutes your interests uniquely would definitely make more sense when you retrospect, and then that drives you forward to whatever you want to take up. So that's a great
Right.
point, KP. So yeah, thanks for making
That's
that.
right.
Yeah, I think we just digged into a lot of important things which we can like now zoom into and like discuss one by one. So one such concept is the whole build in public. So we got to know what build in public really meant in your career, like how you were attracted towards it and how you were able to make your own personality and drive your own career out of it. But in general, if you would just have to explain what it means to build in public. So let's say, you would like to highlight a few things. What would you talk about? And what would you
Yeah.
tell people as not to do and to do?
Right. Great question. I mean, I think it applies to you differently based on your unique context, but generally, broadly, the philosophy is um, sharing, bits and pieces of your journey of, pursuing something, whatever creative pursuit you may be on. It could be building a podcast. It could be, creating a portfolio of side projects. It could be starting a tech company. Whatever pursuit that you're on, if there's a way you could spend 5 to 10 minutes every day, reflect on what you've learned from yesterday to today, or what you've learned in the last week, and share it along the way. Document the steps along the way. Um, especially because it's a reflecting exercise and it makes you feel like you're reflecting and feeling like in control of the narrative, what's going on around me. But it's
Mm.
also an amazing tool to teach and inspire others who
Right.
may be 4 or 5 steps behind you. So this process, and the level of transparency is up to you. You can be extremely transparent. You can share, like some people post revenue figures.
Yeah.
Some people post, like the insider Slack conversation snapshots. Some people like post transcripts of discussions with customers. Whatever you want to,
Mhm.
the format of your building in public and the level of transparency is really up to you. You don't
Mm.
have to go crazy about it. You don't have to be extremist about it. Like you don't have to leak data, leak customer information. At the same time, don't make it look so formal and
Mm.
perfect. It is
Mm.
about authentic sharing along the way
Yeah.
before you get to your huge outcomes and huge milestones. I think that's the big trap, right? Because a lot of us have stories, a lot of us have updates, but we're all
Mm.
waiting for us to get to that big milestone, right? When I start a company and raise, I don't know, $25 million Series A, and then have $100 million exit, then I can write a book and teach others. That's the older mindset. Building in public is, who knows if I'll get there or not. I could like, not get there, like,
Yeah.
or something else could happen, but you're wasting the time waiting. Instead, trying to reflect in the moment, share in the moment, and give away as much as
Mm.
you can about the playbooks, I think is the key. I
Mm.
genuinely believe that if you just show people
Mm.
the real ups and downs, the highs and lows of what it takes to build anything,
Mm.
ironically, there will be a lot more people attracted to it because
Mm.
it is not made inaccessible. Like when somebody like
Right.
you, Aishwarya, when you share your journey of how you recruit speakers, how you got KP on your show or Aarti on your show, and here's the process, here's the things you did, here's the proof of work, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
Ironically, you would think that this will be, oh, wow, she had to go through so many ups and downs to get here. You would think that they would dissuade people to not start a podcast. Actually, ironically, more people will start a podcast and want to
Yeah.
become a podcaster because they realize, oh, if she could do it, maybe I can also try.
Mm.
That's what we're after here, right? I wouldn't have taken the shots in my career that I've taken if I didn't
Mm.
see somebody else take bigger shots and fail in public. And I'm like, whoa, if that person could take a shot and face rejection and be okay, get back up, bounce back,
Mm.
maybe I
Mm.
can try too. Life's too
Yeah.
short to not try. So I mean, that's sort of how I define building in public, right? Sharing along the
Mm.
way and not waiting until you finish the
Mm.
journey to reflect.
Right. No, fantastic explanation. And a lot of it, I would say that it's just being willing to put yourself out there. And like you said, just
Yeah.
don't keep it very manipulative or keep it like in a very structured format. But I guess what I really love about this journey is you can be as candid as possible. Like you can just give people a slice of your own thoughts and people would be surprised. I mean, you yourself would be surprised that there's so much others in your network can actually vibe with, can totally
Yeah.
understand the journey that you're going through. And what I
Yeah.
often see as an advantage over here is like you wait the whole time and then you could publish a book, you can like basically do like a Substack publication and then talk about all this, but you wouldn't know what kind of a network you would be building, what kind of friends you would be
Yeah.
making, who you would be learning
Yes.
with if you would rather do it
Right.
in public, right? So I would say that that's
I fully
definitely been an
agree.
upside in my case.
You can learn so quickly. You can, the
Yeah.
feedback loops are crazy, right? It's all about feedback loops. It's like when I share, here's who I'm inviting on as my guest in my podcast, and here's like the 4 questions I'm asking them. What else would you ask?
Mhm.
There's usually like a ton of questions that come in, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 questions, but there's one question that I had not thought of
Yeah.
that would spark my imagination, be like, whoa, I want to include this. So suddenly my preparation got stronger
Mhm.
because I chose to share the undefined version with the audience, right? And
Yeah.
this example extends to everything I do, right? Like when
Mhm.
like, a couple weeks ago, I launched this practical example. A couple of weeks ago, I had this, I was writing a newsletter, which by the way, I'm like, I think week 19 or something on newsletters, and I'm like really enjoying. Again, it's another layer of creative exploration that I added only recently. For the longest time, I thought newsletters were so intimidating that you had to like run long form writing is like, oh my God, I have to be like David Peddle, like, or I can't do
I
this.
feel
It's too
you.
much. Yeah. But it's so funny how our mind plays these tricks. Like I know the truth, which is people are not looking to read David Perel Part 2. They want to read KP, what I have to say, right? My own unique experience. Like he would probably never quote A.R. Rahman in a podcast. Like I could quote because I grew up in, South India. So there are things that are so authentic and unique to me that sometimes I forget that I have to bring to the forefront. And whatever creative format that I'm choosing right now, let's say newsletter, I have to make the newsletter about what's authentic about me and make it fun and easy for me. Don't like try to compare it with anybody else's. So I waited too long, felt too intimidated by newsletters, but finally got around to it. I think September last year. Now I'm thinking week 19 or 20 now, and I'm enjoying it. And the hack has been very simple, that I stopped worrying about what the brand KP has to publish.
Right.
I think of one person, like when I talk to you on the podcast, I think of you and I try to talk to you like one-on-one. So I imagine the same thing, like I'm talking to one person and sharing some lesson that I've learned or whatever I've learned and hit publish. So anyway, so while I was doing this, I was on a streak and I was feeling hot, but there were some recurring things that I was doing every week in this newsletter journey. And I had a natural organic inclination, impulse that there could be a newsletter CRM. Why is there no newsletter CRM? Why do I have to like save all my contacts in a separate list and an Airtable, blah, blah, blah? And I thought, what if there could be a product here? So again, very natural, organic. And I went from that idea, I paused writing and then went to another window and then went to Twitter and then literally just typed saying, this is an idea that I have. Here's the pitch. And I wrote a pitch. It was so unrefined. Like I didn't even call a friend and validate the idea. It was just so unrefined. But I hit publish and I said, if you're interested, sign up here. And then I put a payment page on Stripe just to see. I'm like, who knows, right? I'm like, you never know.
Yeah.
I got 3 paying customers. I think I got 2 on that day and 3 a day after. Now I have 4 paying customers. The crazy thing is they have not seen the MVP. It's just my words. I painted a picture of what the MVP would look like through my Twitter thread and I validated an idea. Now, that is bonkers to me because that 5 years ago, KP would never do that.
Never.
First of all, I would never have the balls to do it. I would be like so scared, like afraid of judgment. Like I'm sure some person of my audience saw that tweet and be like, why is KP sharing some raw shit? Like it's not even defined. It looks like some, in the process, like half-baked thought. That's okay.
Yeah.
I have the confidence now to accept that. Back then, I didn't have confidence. I was so intimidated that they would judge me. And I'm like, oh my God, they would never care for me. Right? I'm like, no, I don't care. This tweet was meant for those 4 people who became paid customers right away because they resonated with something that this thread spoke to them and it clearly had a pain point that it was addressing. Now I'm like building the MVP, and I just after 2 days later, I launched a landing page. The landing page is bare bones, nothing in there. This is the pitch, like what it does, what's the value, and then email capture. That's it. Again, I could have waited for 2 months until I have a fantastic, polished Webflow, sexy landing page, boom, to make a state. So no, but I got 25 people to sign up right away. So I'm building momentum like brick by brick by brick, as you can see.
Yes.
And one day, 4 months from now, I'll be on another podcast and they'll be like, KP, wow, overnight success, man. What the heck? How did you get to 10K MRR? This is how I got to 10K MRR with one brick at a time. But this is what I want to show to people, right? Like all the great dynasties are built, all the great walls are built one brick at a time. But we just don't know the process because we've never been privy. We've never been given access to the process, right? So we just assume that, oh, these people day one, they had massive success. I mean, they did not. They all had to go through the journey. So as painful as it is, I think it's inspiring to show every step along the way.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you on that, especially like taking it one step at a time. Because in the hindsight, I think a lot of it would just look like a skyrocketing journey, which
Yeah,
just look like boom. It's just like there and like, how did you make it? But all
right.
of this is very microscopic that you have to get it each, one store at a time and then get there towards the end. And like this reminds me of how what James Clear often says about the
Yeah,
habits, right? Like when you try to do something, always focus on the execution because the time spent in execution is much better than time spent in planning. Because if you're just going to like
nice.
sit and keep planning, I guess you're just going to like end up only planning because
Yeah,
day one, the plan is going to stay amazing. Day five, the plan will be so thorough and detailed, but like, where is the step? Like, what did you do to get started? So, I think with your journey, what was very striking for me is how there was a lot of prioritization on speed. Like you get there, you know that you don't know everything, but you're still willing to be there, just to put yourself out and also like learn through the journey. So I think that's very
right.
important because often it's our own voice, right, that stops us from doing it.
Yeah,
Because, like you said, the 5 years old KP wouldn't do this. And if I had to just like put myself over there, that's the same case with me. If I had to like start a podcast, like, like 5-10 years back, I would be like, I just don't have the right audio setup. I just don't have this. I just don't have that. And it's just like a long
and you
list
would.
of things.
I think the other thing too is like you would think, who would listen to me? Like, what do I have to offer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, even at my level, I'm at 40K on Twitter, and I have like this. I think I have a decent brand, right? Given compared to 5 years ago, KP. 5 years ago, KP was a nobody, absolute nobody, like literally nobody. I had talent and skills, which I think a lot of us have, but literally no reputation, social capital, which are some very, very important things, leverage, right? Like you are building leverage through this podcast, right? There are a million other Aishwaryas who are in India right now who are not doing the podcast, and they're just as talented as you are in product. Let me remind you that you're not the only talented person in product, as you know.
Yeah.
You agreed, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
so a lot of my times, like people think I'm so smart. People give me compliments that I'm so smart. I'm like, I actually can't take the compliment because I'm not the smartest person. I will take this compliment that I'm the most prolific person I know of, which means that I will go to action shamelessly and without an ounce of discouragement or embarrassment, and I will take action day in, day out. That I take pride in. But smarts, like I didn't go to IIT. I failed at the IIT JEE exam, right? Like, so I grew up thinking maybe I'm not that smart, So partly all of this came from this insecurity, like, this childhood trauma of not being good enough, like to my uncles and aunts. And I'm like, all right, if they think that I'm not good enough of proving, screw this shit. I'm just kidding. I mean, they were not that hard on me, but I'm saying, I think I never thought I was so smart. But I quickly realized the cheat code to success is not smarts. It's doing these unconventional, boring, unscalable things that are microscopic. So the biggest voice, barrier, Aishwarya, for me when I was starting out was like, who would listen to you? What do you got to offer, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is so ironic because it's like, how does it matter? In the early days, it's about getting those 4 or 5 people who are just as nerdy and obsessed about those 4 things you care about, right? Like my example earlier, when I'm talking about this newsletter sponsorship CRM, it's not a broad topic. I'm not saying I'm not building a social media network or something where that's like a very broad topic. Then I need volumes and volumes of people to sign up. If it's such a niche use case and a niche scenario, actually, I don't need those many people. So most people think that when you want to start something, you need like a ton of people. No, you just need like 3 or 4, 5, 6 people to get going. And over time, everybody and their grandma will come join you. You just have to believe it, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, like start with the most basics as possible, because that's what would help you leverage a bigger community out there later. So that's very true. Yeah.
Right.
So, Kirti, one of the other things that I would love to know from you is we talk about so many ideas, especially even the recent one that you just told me about, how you just have this whole CRM idea. So with constant ideas just hitting you all the time, how do you like navigate through these and what do you prioritize and how do you know this is the one that I want to work on while the rest of them are something that I'm just going to like put them onto the idea bank and come back later? So what's your process like when it comes to this?
It's a very messy process. Wish was more refined than it is. But I try to think of like what's giving me energy, right? Number one.
Mhm.
And number two is I try to think of like based on the season of my career, like in this season of my career, what is my pursuit? Like there are
Right.
parts. So when I first started in no code, so at that
Mhm.
season, 2018, I had a resume filled with like corporate logos. But I had no on Twitter. And I was just
Right.
like any other, professional. Like there's, millions of them like that, right? So, but my curiosity and my pursuit was I want to build a project. I want to build a side project. I have some time. I was single at the time, or actually I was, dating someone, but like I had like some free time in the evenings or whatever. So I wanted to be a builder, maker. That was the pursuit. But
Mhm.
then the prioritization came from the fact that I needed something um, to help me accelerate, like some kind of a fuel that would help me there. At the
Right.
time, that was supposed to be my Twitter followers because I had like 414. I'm like, I need to grow to 1,000. So I focused and prioritized on Twitter. I built a lot of like, so I created a lot of tweets. I was very prolific at the time. So that season, I think I went from there to like, I think 3,000, 4,000 followers. And so it was all about building an audience, enough audience so that when I have an interesting idea that I have some feedback loop, right?
Right.
Um,
Right. Used it very real
later,
time.
right, real time. And later, after the 3,000, 4,000 mark, I realized that I got the green card and I was like, okay, I'm no longer in H1B shackles. So I can work for any company, which means I can work for a startup. Um, so the prioritization at the time was like, I want to break into startups, but
Mhm.
I want to break into like some really powerful rocket ships that I would be proud of. Like, I was early on. I was early into. So the prioritization at the time was about how do I go talk to these people who already made it to startups? What can I learn from them? What
Mm.
part of my story do I need to adapt and be more of a proof of work? Like what kind of proof of work do I need to collect to get to that startup thing? Which at the time I
Mm.
got to OnDeck. And so once I was on OnDeck, then I was like, um, I felt like it was a dream. I felt like I was now living the dream. I was happy. But then the next season's prioritization was I wanted to build a content empire,
Right.
but basically a diversified content portfolio. Like, oh, I just have Twitter. What if I have a podcast?
Mhm.
Go into podcast. So, every season now, 2023, the pursuit that I'm on is I want to build a portfolio of bootstrap businesses.
Mhm.
Um, I'm hoping one of them will take off and will like, set me up for success and like give me a great exit. I don't have to work for the rest of my life after that, right? But I'm not so attached to that outcome. I'm more attached to the process,
The
and
purpose.
this is very clear to me that this is the top priority for this season, which is to create seeds and put seeds into a portfolio approach.
Mhm.
At the same time, do what I love doing, which is my content
Right.
portfolio, which is my podcast, which I'm going to continue to do, my Twitter, and now, of course, the newsletter. So these three,
Mm.
at some point, I will do LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever. See, like, there's always more to do. So after a certain level of success, you have an abundance of doors to knock on, abundance of opportunities to do. So then it really becomes like what gives you energy for this season. Do
Mhm.
that. Don't judge yourself. Don't compare yourself with anybody else. Have fun, and we'll have another season. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, EP, you said it's messy, but I see so much methodology in this whole process. So it's great to know that. I like how you look at it as seasons, right? Like, what would this season KP or this season Aishwarya would surely want to achieve? Like, what's the purpose behind? And then use that as a sort of checker for any sort of an idea or any project activity that you want to take upon. Because
Yes.
I totally
So
vibe with you when you say that there's a lot to do, right? Like, there's always different platforms you want to be on. There's always like different
yeah,
things you want to catch up on, but it's just not going to be all possible at the same time. So yes.
exactly. It's beautiful, and it's a great problem to have, isn't it? Right? Like I remember the days when I was 10 years ago. I had nothing to do, and nobody were nobody would pitch me. Now I'm getting pitched every single day, 4 or 5 times. Somebody wants to write copywriting for me. Somebody wants to offer me like, KP will take your podcast, make it into TikTok video. Every day
Yeah.
there's someone pitching me to get me on a new platform, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
like at some point you'll feel this in the future. Like somebody like they're always offering new doors, right? Somebody wants me
Yeah.
to like speak at something.
It's
So
just
I'm like,
fortunate that, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
which is a fortunate problem. It's the problem,
Yeah.
but it's a beautiful problem. I'm like, okay, thank you. People want me. That's great. So now it becomes really a question of if you had like I think of like all these people who would have the same problem. Like, think of all these people like A.R. Rahman would have the same problem, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody wants a piece of him. Like who doesn't want him, right?
Yeah.
So if he cannot he cannot produce music for 3,000 Tamil movies or 2,000 Bollywood movies a year, so he
Mhm.
has to pick and choose,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is there a calculated, scientific, like perfectly logical approach in why he chooses A.M. Ratnam or somebody else over? Like, I don't think it's just a vibe. He just goes on. All right, I've done plenty of, I don't know, some kind of a genre. Let me try this
Mhm.
other genre and challenge myself. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I pick a new pursuit, it has two components. It has a curiosity component,
Mhm.
like I want to learn that, and it has a challenge component, which means it's outside my comfort zone. So right now in 2023, the Building Public Studio approach, this portfolio that I'm trying to build, is I'm very curious about these $1 million exits. There are people that I know on my network, on my Twitter, and like within my friend circles, who've made $1 to 3 4 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue, and got micro acquired for 5x that, so $5 6 million in acquisition. They're basically like set for life. They don't have to work a day job. Of course, they're so hungry and they're back to building another business, which is another thing.
Yeah.
I am very curious about these the portfolio approach, right? Like building a portfolio of software or SaaS products and bootstrapped. Um, and it's outside my comfort zone in the sense that I haven't done um, such big companies. I've done small side projects. I've had small exits, but a
Mhm.
seven-figure exit is a big deal. I haven't done that, but it feels within reach to me. So I just want to make sure that I indulge myself this whole year in the learnings and the knowledge and wisdom of other people who've done it, and learn from
Right.
them, and try my hand at this, be prolific at it, um, you know, face the ups and downs, and then come out
Mhm.
the other side of it successful. So everything else now has moved to the background. All the other things that I do, right? They all I will still do them, like audience building and they're all there, but they've moved to the second priority.
Mhm.
The number one priority
Mhm.
is this now. So that's how I think
Yeah.
about priority.
Yeah. Yeah. I think putting what is more focus for yourself on the spotlight really could help you just narrow down and like get those things alone done. And some of those apt examples that you brought through is also trying to show how much, like, I see such a similarity between you growing as a person and at the same time getting the branded projects that you're working on as well onto the same plane. Because often there's
Mhm.
this mismatch between, okay, should I like talk about myself? Should I talk about the stuff that I'm building? But it's like a very fine balance. So you grow as a person, like you get known as a brand yourself. At the same time, it's also like a lot of stuff that you build that you get out together with you. So I think it's pretty good, and like I love the direction that you're going towards. So all the
Yeah.
best with the portfolio approach, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
sharing that with us.
Follow along and you'll see all the ins and outs of the journey.
For sure, for sure. Okay, yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I would love to pick your brain on one last thing, which is we spoke a lot about just getting up there, having to talk about every little part of the journey, and just getting to make more, friends from the network. So there's also this important part with the community or a platform where you meet these like-minded folks that kind of plays a very, very important role, right? Especially platforms like Product Hunt, where you've been like one of those top community folks there, and like
Right.
other platforms like Kernel and Indie Hackers and a lot of these
Right.
places. So how do you best leverage the network and connections from there, and how do you basically contribute at the same time make the best use of the folks that you meet out of these platforms?
Yeah. I mean, the one tip that I have in any of these community platforms is give way more than you take.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the times people get burnt out with the platforms or communities is because they are it's like they enter a party and they're just waiting for somebody to come talk to them. And if they don't feel like anyone's paying attention to them, then they're like, okay, let me bounce. It's not working out. But really, the way these things work, and we had this, saying when I was at OnDeck, where it was one of the core tenets was called spirit of service, and we recruited and chose people as OnDeck fellows specifically if they had this trait of spirit of service, which means that they were willing to give first, not worried about ROI and returns and all that stuff. So that applies, I think, broadly to any of the online communities. When I was a product hunt, every day I had, I remember this is like 2018 and 19, for 2 years, every day I had a daily app reminder, daily phone reminder that I would go on product hunt for 10 minutes and leave 2 or 3 thoughtful comments on other people's projects. Now that's contributing as a member. Even before I was building projects, and I had a following, all this, I was willing to be a contributor there.
Right.
Even now, if you notice, like, I'm always like jumping in there and then trying to say something. Even on Twitter, if somebody launches something, I'm always, leaving a comment or giving them feedback. Or the other day, just some guy was writing a bunch of threads and he was asking the people, like asking his community feedback, and I gave very specific, actionable feedback in public, not even in DMs, because I want other people to read it and maybe get value from that. And so there's 4 tips that I shared with him. So I think, the hack is being a contributor puts you in the top 10% on any community. Now, if you're a contributor and a creator who has a portfolio of things, you're in the top 1%. You're like elite level. So that's what I would advise.
Right. Yeah. Just be willing to share whatever you've learned. And even before that, just before you try to ask anybody, just share whatever your thoughts and what you think would make more sense there. And then use that as a loop to build more relationships.
I think it's a lot of us know this, I think subconsciously, but we just feel like, in business, you have to be like a shark and cunning. Actually, I'm the opposite example. I've never been like a shark in the last 15 years. I've given way more than I've ever asked, and I feel like I'm crushing it. So it's like that's an example there where you don't have to get the best out of the deal. Leave some on the table. It's okay. Kindness wins. Giving value first wins. You may not be an instantaneous grandmaster success, and I think that's okay. I want to live with that reality where it's okay if I get to my big wins in 10 years as opposed to 10 days.
No, very true. And like this brings memories of what Aarti and I spoke in one part of our conversation. We spoke about playing the kind of game that you want, which is like, do you want to play like a zero-sum game, or do you want to play the infinite game where you just contribute, like you do the best because you believe in others, and you also like just want to let other builders take the same path that you've done and just help people out of the fact that you just feel like helping, and not always like looking at, okay, I have done this now, and now what are they going to do it back for me? And just like not look at it more as a, I did this and where is it for me? But just being
forget
there
the
to help
scorecard.
others. Exactly.
Yeah, just forget the scorecard. Just do it.
Yeah, very true, very true. Yeah, I hope the listeners are able to get this part of it done, because like you said, it's very easy. It's kind of like things that we can do, but often that voice that we spoke about, which comes and like stops us from taking that first step, is what really hinders the game. So I hope the listeners would take more inspiration from what you've done, what others in the past have done, and just get started with their own stuff. So
awesome. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, KP. It was amazing. Finally talking to you, and like I've noticed your journey. I've just been reading through your journey, and it's like amazing to have you talk about it with me, almost in person, I would say. So thanks a lot, and I really think that the listeners have a lot of stuff to learn from in terms of building public, because it's great that somebody's been there, somebody's just like literally passed that wave of putting things out, getting feedback, and just doing this as a more tried and tested method. And often it's something that a lot of these creative people should definitely know about. So thanks a lot for sharing it with us.
Of course. Awesome. This was fun. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.